welcome to the Washington State Pinball Stronghold. I'm your host, the Black Knight, and although you can't see me real well, you might be able to see me in a future shot as we pan north to the back glass. But today we're going to be talking about the history, the features, and the gameplay of Bally's 1969 electromechanical pinball machine, Joust. Now, what makes this game fairly unique was it was one of 30 machines made during the mid-period of the EM era that used a feature called zipper flippers. Now, the three things that we're going to go in order we're going to talk about. First thing we're going to do is discuss the history of the game, just a little bit, not too much because it might get a little boring. The second thing we're going to do is talk about the features and the scoring. And the third part we're going to talk about is actual gameplay and actually maximizing your score in this particular title. So like I was saying, one of the primary features that makes this game unique is these things called zipper flippers. And what happens is these two small 2-inch flippers come together and they close the gap, which is roughly 2 times the size of a pinball, allowing the ball to not be escaped from gameplay. This game is notable, similar to other titles, by a designer called Ted Zale. He also designed EM classics such as Fireball, Nip It, and 4 Million BC. And he actually created 19 of the 30 games that actually use zipper flipper functions. And another thing that's notable about Ted Zale was that his protege, Jim Patella, was actually the creator of many of the most famous early solid state games, and he was actually his protege. So moving on a little bit more about the machine. Like I said, this was built in 1969. It was actually built in 2 different models. There was an add-a-ball model and there was a standard play model, and that was to get around some of the problems of restrictions based on the fact that pinball machines in still many parts of the country were designated as gambling machines. Another thing that's unique about this particular game is, and I won't have it panned up yet, but the back glass was predominantly made in crystal glass, which is a little different than today, but it was also made in plexiglass as a test function for this particular game, and so it was actually made in 2 different types. Some other facts that would be useful to know is there was about 1,050 games of this particular model made, which makes it somewhat highly uncommon overall as a pinball machine itself. I would recommend is if you do find one and you enjoy electromechanical pinball machines, that you have the opportunity to play one, and perhaps you'll even fall in love with it like many other people have in the past. So moving on to the actual features of the game and how it actually works. Like I was saying, we already talked about the zipper flippers down here. The other notable feature that comes from this game is this Mini-bagatelle Playfield, which has scoring buttons 1 through 9. And that's the primary means that the game actually you're able to score large points. And it still takes quite a bit of work because a lot of people that are used to playing solid state games and then they try to practice on an electromechanical pinball machine, they generally have a problem with it because the game's ball times are sometimes very, very short due to the flipper size. So on the ball, actually, one of the things that makes this unique, similar to other games of the era and similar to games that were made by Ted Zale, is this game does have a skill shot. When the ball enters from the shooter lane here and it travels to the top of the play field, it actually, the first thing you really ultimately want to do is there's a rebound bumper right here, and if you're able to touch this, once you're able to hit the primary rebound bumper at the top, it will actually light in spot number 5. At that point, you hopefully are able to get the ball into this saucer, which immediately lights the 5 inside or 5 on this playfield, and this light goes out and spots it for 1,000 points in that, but it also lights the light, which we'll talk about in a short bit. When the ball, once it's kicked out from the saucer, normally it goes into these pop bumpers. These 2 here are worth 10 points apiece, and this point is worth 100 points. Something to note, early games, if you look closely at the flyer, you'll see the actual pop bumper caps are actually reversed. You'll see 2 reds and 1 yellow versus 2 yellows and 1 red. Production games use this feature. Early production sample games use 2 red and red. It's an easy way to spot the difference if the game is still original. Now, as I was mentioning, usually once the ball enters from the saucer into the pop bumpers, and we're talking about scoring points, if you're fortunate to have a ball that rebounds either by luck off of one of the rubbers from the sides or out of the pop bumpers onto this white mushroom bumper, which is that's what it's called, it will immediately cause the zipper flippers to close. And it'll also award you 1,000 points at the same time. Now at that point, once these zipper flippers are closed, they will not open again until a couple things happen. So ultimately what you want to do is you want to let the ball roll down to the bottom of the zipper flippers here and let them rest. At that point you want to be able to make a shot into the Mini-bagatelle playfield to try to hit these switch contacts, lighted buttons, and be able to spot as many as you can. Now you don't score any points by doing that, but what you do is you light lights on the playfield. Now in order to score any points in regards to what I consider to be the major points of the game, you have to light at least 1 through 6 or 7, 8, 9. Okay? If you're able to light 1, 2, 3 or 4, 5, 6, okay, if you light all these in, and it doesn't have to be in sequence, it just has to be able to be lit, you'll score 3,000 points. If you're able to score 7, 8, 9, you'll score 5,000 points. And if you're able to score all 9, and there are several ways you can do that, you'll be scoring 10,000 points. The game will reset the actual numbers and allow you to continue. Now, it's actually a little trickier than it sounds, and here's the reason why. Some of these mini mushroom bumpers that you see here will spot numbers, such as I was talking about. The saucer shot or the skill shot scores number 5 if it's lit and when it lands in a saucer. If it does not and it lands into the pop bumpers first, after a sequence of several hits, the light will go out. This will score 4, which is never a bad thing, and will close the flippers. This will spot 1, and this actually is one of the other features that's primary in the game, and it's called the free ball gate. It's a way that Bally got around it to be able to provide an additional means for players to reshoot the ball into play. But once this is, if the zipper flippers are closed, the free ball gate is not an option. However, it can be lit, but it will not be shown. Even though this is not a computer-driven game, the switch contacts will still know that this is an option. So once the zipper flippers open, it will then light this as an option. However, in addition to being able to do that, you also have to be able to touch this button, which successfully opens this gate, which allows this ball, if it should go into the right-hand lane, instead of draining out of the game, to go back into the shooter lane for another play. Now, some other things you should know about the game itself. We talked about the points, and I'm going to do a quick recap again of all the points that are scored in the game. 1,000 points for the saucer each time it's scored, regardless of whether or not it hits the 5. 1,000 points for this particular white mushroom bumper. 10 points for each pop bumper. 100 points for this pop bumper. 1,000 points for this pop bumper. And 100 points for 2 of these yellows. And then the additional one is you have to notice, and I'm going to have my assistant here pan north, as you go towards the top of the back glass and you look at the score reels to the far right. This is a 2-player game by nature. The last digit is a single number, and there's only 3 ways to score that. But when the end of the game scores based on the ability to actually get an additional credit, the number will come up 1 through 9, and that is entirely based on the last digit. So now if you go ahead and pan back down to the playfield, there's only 3 ways to score a number 1, and a lot of people don't realize that. There's a switch contact here, there's a switch contact here on this rubber, and there's a switch contact here on this rubber. These are the only 3 rubbers that control the 1s. Everything else is either a 10, 100, or 1,000. The 2 rebound bumpers for the bumpers down here, those are 10 points apiece. So in reality, is if you're looking to try to find a way to score an extra credit for a game, it's almost entirely based on pure luck. The design of the playfield itself isn't claustrophobic by any means, but one of the largest challenges is based on the angling of these two particular rebound bumper sets with the Slingshots. It makes controlling the ball quite difficult, even if the zipper flippers are able to be closed. In addition to what I was mentioning in terms of that goes on to the further part of the features before we go into gameplay, these particular mushroom bumpers also control the opening of the zipper flippers, because I talked about that even though you're closing them to close the gap with this white one, if you touch either one of these yellow pop bumpers or mushroom bumpers, the zipper flippers will immediately open, thereby increasing the chance that you may lose the ball. The other way that they will always open is even if this is able to be closed, once you're able to shoot the ball into the Mini-bagatelle playfield, once it rolls to the end of the run, immediately running into this button, the mini zipper flippers will open. This makes the game rather challenging to be able to maintain because of not only the gap spacing of the flippers down at the bottom, but the layout, like I was stating, based on the angles of the actual rubber bumpers, the ball has a tendency to bounce wildly from one side to the other with no chance for the actual flippers to control the ball. So the best strategy when you're actually playing the game, as already mentioned, the maximum amount of score that you can score at any one time is 10,000 points by scoring 1 through 9, is to be prepared once the ball comes out of this saucer here, hits this mushroom bumper here, closes the pop bump or the zipper flippers, and you want to be able to shoot the ball into the Mini-bagatelle playfield as many times as possible in a short sequence. Being prepared that when this ball leaves from this, it will angle its way to this flipper, and be prepared to shoot it back in. Now, one thing that should be noted that should show up fairly clearly on the actual video is in the Mini-bagatelle playfield, there's actually the directional control of the ball is completely random. It has metal stud nuds that are embedded into the playfield above each one of the numbers, along with mini nails that are at the top and the sides. This causes the ball to very randomly fall about. The angle and most likelihood of the actual ball rolling through at any one given time generally will be anywhere between 2 and 5 numbers. So it makes it more difficult that it must require that a player be able to re-enter the Mini-bagatelle playfield at least 2, 3, or even 4 or 5 times in order to complete the entire sequence of 1 through 9. So considering all that we've talked about, we'll talk about the actual operation as it applies when we fire up the game, and then we're going to go ahead and show some gameplay of the actual game itself. Now, the first thing that you should understand is all EM pinball machines generally have the power on at all times. And I'm going to have my assistant's going to help me here in a minute, but she doesn't have to yet, so she can go ahead and stand up. All right, so what I'm trying to say is, for those people that aren't necessarily familiar with electromechanical pinball machines, the first thing you should be aware is, unless it's been modified for pure home use, when you plug this machine in at your house, it's already on. You just don't know it. And a lot of people, unlike those that may be familiar with later model machines of the solid state era, may not be aware of this. Now, I showed my assistant carefully when this machine was set up several weeks ago after I pulled it out of storage, that you can actually hear the hum of the electromechanical parts and the actual transformer in the bottom of the playfield. So ultimately, you should be careful if you're ever going to be considering to work on a particular, it doesn't really matter what electromechanical pinball machine you were talking about. It can be a wood rail from the 1950s, or even a Gottlieb wedge head from the early 60s, or even to this later electromechanical model into this late 60s and early 70s. They're pretty much all set up the same way. They're not a modern game. You need to be aware that high voltage electricity is running through the game at all times. So if you're planning to work on the game, always unplug the game. Now, the way that I've got around it here today, the game is actually not on at all, and I actually have a power switch that is automatically controlled by remote, which allows me to power the game on. and that'll allow it to give electricity to the circuit. Now, many people are not always familiar in how to start up this particular game, and it isn't a mystery thing, but most people are looking for an on and off switch, which is similar to what my assistant was doing just a few minutes ago, which she was completely correct. However, all early Bally machines, once you turn on the power for the game, which I'll do without you seeing on the backside, all you have to do is press the left flipper button, and it will automatically turn on the GI socket or circuits and prepare the game to be played. Now, if a game is wired for home use, as this one is, many times you can just press the start button, which is normally where the credits will be held, and then you would be able to also power up the game and it would be prepared to start to play. So the sequence of the game, and some people that may be familiar with electromechanical machines maybe already know this, but one thing that they may not know is that in the 60s and before the last run of electromechanical machines occurred in the 70s, the score reels that you see at the top, it's behind the back box, were actually called totalizers, meaning totalizers for score. So the sequence of the game, without going into all the intricacies of what they call a lockout coil and the score motor, once the key factor is once the score reels do set back to 0, that tells the game that the game is now ready for play and ready to start and serve its first ball. Not considering any of the other pre-steps that the game goes through inside the cabinet in preparation for that. So at this time we're going to go ahead and show you a test play and some of the features of the game. So go ahead and put it and start it up. So the game, you won't see it, but you just heard it. The game just started to play. She's going to shoot the ball into play. You're going to see that it just touched off, and she lost the ball really fast. Okay, hold on a second. So that was actually a good shot. Well, the ending was a little tough, but we can understand that. The key is, you see that when she shot the ball into play from the actual shooter lane, she was able to touch this bumper switch, which is not a rebound bumper per se. It only scores. It doesn't score anything. All it does is light this light, and then if it goes into the saucer, she's awarded 1,000 points. So let's go ahead and try it again. I might have to intervene a little bit on behalf, which is totally fine. Oh, okay, so she did get another shot. Okay, she is hitting some of the mushroom bumpers, keeping the ball in play. She's opened the free ball gate. And you can see now what I was talking about by the ball having a little bit of high amount of randomness. She's just closed the zipper flippers, but unfortunately the ball went up the outlane. Now before you shoot the ball back into play, something to consider again, a lot of people say, well, hey, this seems like a really good option to shoot for if you need to. It's kind of a freebie. You get this last chance, like maybe say you did in Black Knight, to get another shot at the free ball. The problem is there's absolutely positively no way to shoot for this shot from the ball. It practically is a random shot, usually coming off of this slingshot into this lane. So it's actually quite random, and it's very hard to achieve. So even if it's lit, great, but the chances of actually getting it are quite small. Keeping in mind that if the zipper clippers are closed, this shot is not available. So go ahead and fire it in again. This time I'm kind of like intercede on behalf of her to try to give an idea of how to actually play, make it a little easier for everybody to understand. So we're going to say that the ball landed in this saucer like we just talked about, and it rebounds off of the mushroom bumper, which allows her to close the zipper flippers to the bottom. And I'd like her to try to shoot the ball from here up into the Mini-bagatelle playfield, and she's got it right. I'm going to give a little bit of a hint. Okay, remember watching that ball before it. The key is you want to slightly hit this flipper a little early on the right side, right before you hit this flipper, and it'll give the momentum of the ball to stay on this side of the playfield, thereby launching the momentum of the ball into the mini playfield. She's got it close. Do a little tap. They call it the tap method. One thing players need to get used to when they're playing a electromechanical pinball machine is it does not play anywhere near like a solid state game. I'm going to go ahead and close those zipper flippers again for her so she can try it again. tapping the right flipper slightly before the left will launch the ball. Practice makes perfect, you know. Oh, she got the ball open again. We'll try it again. Okay, she got the other shot right, but not the one we're looking for yet. Alright, we'll give it a little bit of a test nudge, as they say. Alright, so in theory what she wants to do, and unfortunately it's too difficult for me to be able to do while I'm actually talking on the camera, is she's going to be hitting it off of this flipper here. So she's going to be prepared to actually have the ball exit when it comes out. So when you shoot it from this flipper, now this shot here can be shot from either flipper. It can be hit high from this point to here, or hit from rather on the low side on the left flipper. Either way will work. So once you launch it through that period, as you saw, the zipper flippers immediately they're open. Now, looking at the mini playfield with basically everything that was already going on, you can see that 7 of the 9 lights are already lit, which means that when this ball is ended, which actually is the last ball of play, this game is currently set up for 3-ball play, she will score 3,000 bonus points. She'll never lose it unless she tilted, which of course I know she won't. So that's the key. But if we're able to get 7 and 8 at this point, we will score the full 10,000 points. So we're going to go ahead and run the cap so you can hear the score reels run, and we can actually rack up an additional 10,000 points. It might take a couple tries. Now that one right there, that scored the 7. Let's try it again. So think of it like gambling in some ways, I guess, because the Mini-bagatelle playfield is like playing Keno. Okay, that hit the switches, but it didn't hit what we're looking for. So you can see it's kind of a challenge to actually get the full 10,000 points, because certain shots of the mini playfield over here are actually harder to do than others. You see, it's not quite rolling through. The randomness of the game isn't just giving it to us. So the chances of being able to actually score the full 10,000 points is actually quite difficult. Can we do it? No luck on that point. Let's try it again. Still doesn't want to give it to us with the nubs. Well, we're all getting kind of frustrated at this point, so I'm going to show it and tell you what happens when it gets touched. Okay, so at this point, at the end of the ball, okay, it will give you all the points. But the ball has to drain first, in this case. But once the light go out, and there goes the points. So there is Bally's Joust from 1969. It's a wonderful game. If you can find one, there's just not that many left out there. They are hiding out there in the wilderness and in the wild. Some of them don't quite look as good as in this shape. This game, as far as final notes, this game was restored, but it was not fully restored. And the simple difference is the game is clean. The game is operating properly as it should, but it does not have, for say, a clear-coated brand new playfield, or it was not stripped down and re-clear coated. Not every single part was, polished to a high shine. Currently, the back glass that I have in the game is excellent. It's not flaking, but there were small bits of lost paint, because keeping in mind, folks, this is a 47-year-old pinball machine. And, well, 47-year-old pinball machines can kind of start to show their age over time, and this one has definitely seen its fair share of play. There is normally, for electromechanical pinball machines, in there as a ball or a game counter. This one shows a little over 30,000 plays, which I clearly know is not the case. If I had to estimate right now, this game probably has 130,000 plays. But it does play well, so enjoy this first video for a Bally Joust, which I consider to be the first night experience long before games like Black Knight ruled the arcades. So this is the Black Knight signing off. Until next time, keep flipping.
them all! You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs! Have at you!